Chapter 8. Freely ye have received, freely give. Whether Tip felt it or not, there were some changes in his home. Mrs. Lewis, though worried and hurried and cross enough, still was not so much so as she had been. The house was quieter. There was no cradle to rock. There were no baby footsteps to follow and keep out of danger. She had more time for sewing. Yet this very thing, the missing of the clinging arms about her neck, sometimes made her heavy heart vent itself in short, sharp words. But Tip had astonished the family at home. It didn't require wonderful changes to do it. Rather, the change which they saw in him seemed wonderful. The fire which he found ready-made in the morning, the full pail of fresh water, the box filled with wood, were all so many drops of honey to the tired mother's heart. The awkward pat of his father's pillow, which Tip now and then gave as he lingered to ask how he was, seemed so new and delightful to that neglected father's heart, that he lay on his hard bed and thought of it much all day. Tip got on better at home than anywhere else. He had not so many temptations. He had been such a lawless, reckless boy that they had all learned to leave him very much to himself, and as not a great deal of his time was spent there, his trials at home were not many. As for Kitty, she did not cease to wonder what had happened to Tip. She perhaps felt the difference more than anyone else, for it had been the delight of his life to tease her. Now, from the time he gathered his books with the first sound of the school bell and hurried up the hill, until he returned at night ready to split wood, hoe in the garden, or do any of the dozen things that he had never been known to do before, he was a never-failing subject of thought and wonderment to her. Watching him closely, the only thing she could finally settle on, as the cause of the change which she found in him, was that he now went every Sabbath morning to the Sabbath school. The mystery must be hidden there. Having decided that matter, Kitty speedily resolved that she would go there herself and see what they did. Many were the kind hearts that had tried to coax her into that same Sabbath school and had failed. But this Saturday afternoon's gazing out of the window with a wonderfully sober face had ended in her exclaiming, "I say, Mother, I want a needle and thread." "What do you want with a needle and thread?" asked Mrs. Lewis, stirring away at some gruel in a tin basin, and not even glancing up. "I want to mend my dress. It's torn this way and that, and looks awful. I want some green thread the color of this wide stripe." Now for a minute the gruel was forgotten, and Mrs. Lewis looked at Kitty in amazement. "Dear me," she said at last, "I don't know what will happen next. It can't be possible that you're going to work to mend your own dress without being scolded about it for a week and then made to do it." "Yes, I am, too. I ain't going to look like a rag bag another hour, and I'm going to wash out my sunbonnet and iron it, and then I mean to go over to that Sunday school tomorrow. I ain't heard any singing since I was born as I know of, and I mean to." The gruel began to burn, and Mrs. Lewis turned to it again, saying nothing, but thinking a great deal. Once she used to go to Sabbath school herself when she was Kitty's age, and she didn't have to mend her dress first either. She used to be dressed freshly and neatly every Sabbath morning by her mother's own careful hands. She poured the gruel into a bowl and then went over to her work-box. "Here's a needle and thread," she said at last, drawing out a snarl of green thread from the many snarls in her box. "Mend your dress if you want to, and I'll wash out your bonnet for you towards night, when I get that vest done." It was Kitty's turn to be astonished now. She had not expected help from her mother. Tip lingered in the kitchen on Sabbath morning. He looked neat and clean. He had a fresh, clean shirt, thanks to the washing which his mother had done towards night. He was all ready for school, yet he waited. Kitty clattered around, making rather more noise even than usual as she washed up the few poor dishes. Evidently Tip was thinking about her. The truth was, his lamp had shown him a lesson that morning like this: freely ye have received, freely give. He stopped at that verse, reading no further. What did it mean? It surely spoke to him. Had not God given, oh, so many things to him? Had he not promised to give him heaven for his home? Now here was the direction: freely give. What? And to whom? To God? Surely not. Tip was certain that he had nothing to give God, nothing but his poor sinful heart, which he believed the Savior had taken and made clean. What could he give to anyone? He leaned out of his little window, busy with this thought. Kitty came out to the door and pumped her pan full of water. He looked down at her. There was Kitty. Had he anything which he could give her? He shook his head mournfully. Not a thing. But wouldn't it be the same if he could help her to get something? What if he could coax her to go to Sunday school? Perhaps it would do for all that it had done for him. And at this moment the unwearied Satan came with his wicked thoughts. Kitty would be a pretty-looking object to go to Sabbath school. Not a decent thing to wear. Everybody would laugh at her and at you. Besides, I don't believe she would go. If you did ask her, she would only make fun of you. Better not try it. "Oh, Tip Lewis," said his conscience, "what a miserable coward you are. After all you have promised, you won't risk a laugh for the sake of getting Kitty into the Sabbath school?" "Yes, I will," said Tip as he ran downstairs, and this was why he lingered in the kitchen, not knowing just what to say. Kitty helped him. "Tip," she said, "I suppose they sing over at that Sunday school, don't they?" "I guess they do," and Tip's eyes brightened. "Ever so many of them sing at once, and it sounds grand. They play the melodeon, too. Don't you want to go and hear it?" "I don't know. I don't suppose it will be any stupider than staying at home. I get awful sick of that. If I knew the way, maybe I would go." "Oh, I'll take you," said Tip in a quick, eager way. He wanted to speak before his courage failed. So Kitty, in her stiff blue sunbonnet and green calico dress, went to Sabbath school. There was no mission class for girls, so Mr. Parker sent her among the gaily dressed little girls in Miss Haley's class. But Mr. Holbrook detained Tip.